My name is Jimmy Purdy, shop owner, master tech, transmission builder, and the host of the Gearbox Podcast. Here I talk with new and seasoned shop owners, as well as industry professionals about day-to-day operations within their own shops and all the failures and successes that come along the way. From what grinds your gears to having to shift gears in the automotive industry, this is the Gearbox Podcast.
Can I ask you a couple questions real quick?
Yeah, what's up?
Tell me about your shop and tell me why you do this.
Yeah, that's a good question, So we were transmission specialists. That's when I bought the shop. So the shop was originally a transmission shop in Paso Robles, where we're located, and it was automatic transmission service at Paso Robles. I bought it in 2017 is when I finally paid it off and tried to continue that direction of transmission specialist. Well, finding a rebuilder I was a rebuilder. And my whole thought when I started the business was if I could build the best units, I'm going to have the best transmission shop in the county, in the state, right? Like, I'm just going to do the best. And I slowly realized that that's not how you run a business. So
Right.
since then, I've every year pivoted a little bit more into more maintenance, and we've gone more into just general auto repair. I have a lot of technical capabilities when it comes to transmission, so I still get a lot of referrals from other shops that bring in transmission problems. So that's basically what, I guess, in a nutshell, kind of what we do. Um, and honestly, it's pivoted from being in this industry and learning and just trying to get to the top, right? Like when I was 18, 19 years old, I was a smog technician. I'm like, I'm going to be the best smog technician. So I got all my SEs, master tech, got all that stuff. And I'm like, what's next? Oh, I can build transmissions. I'm gonna get certified, and it just kept growing. And I realize now with running a business, it's way bigger than me. So I think my why is like changed because it's so much bigger than what I anticipated it was going to be. And I think having seen how many bad shops are out there or how many technicians are not treated, or paid like they should be, and the shops aren't being ran correctly, and it's a disservice to clients, I've realized the hole in the market. And and then fixing these holes and seeing how it changes and providing such a clean environment for everyone here. And it's just the why is constantly changing for me. I don't have a good why to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
I get that quite. I hear that a lot, like with coaching services and reading it on the groups, and it's like you got to find your why before anything else. It's like I don't know, and like write your business statement and your vision statement, which is all like I don't know, not that important to me, I think, looking back. But I think it's important to have everyone on the team pointed in a direction. But I don't think that needs to stay in concrete. I don't know. It's just you're navigating these waters, and it's like what is it this year that we're gonna do, or in the next quarter, or in the next month? Like that's kind of been my driving force. And I find something, and I really like that thing, and then I attach onto it, and I'm like, oh, let's push that direction. DVIs. Let's get DVIs, and let's get these things dialed, and let's make sure we're not doing this just to upsell. That we're doing this so that we're making sure we're catching everything that's wrong with the vehicle. And in my thought was, well, if the client comes in and they know this is what we're doing and we charge them for it, that's a totally different service than if it comes in and we sneak this DVI on them and then we try to upsell on the back end to make up for that. So my thought is, okay, you come in, it's $100. We're going to do a DVI and we'll give you everything that it needs. And I feel like that's the differentiating line for me to keep so you're not like just selling stuff that you don't really need to try to make up that loss.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know.
I can appreciate that. And, the digital inspection, I think is an awesome tool, but it's also a dangerous tool.
Right.
If you don't do it right, right? Or, if your content isn't good. And I gotta be honest with you, I fight with that all the time now because, especially when you hire new people or you've got general service techs or just, guys that aren't as skilled as others. And, they complete them, and let's just say their grammar is not good, or the pictures don't make any sense. And my fear is like firing that off to the customer with a poor explanation, because it does more harm than good, I feel like, right? Because if the product that you want to deliver doesn't meet your standards, then then why send it, why share it, why do it? And
Yeah,
I
that
know,
and the level of competence that the client is, and what you're sending them. Like what is this? Is this good or bad?
yeah, well,
What's it
exactly.
supposed to look like?
I have so many thoughts on that, but I have a couple talking points, so I probably should back up to those for a second, if I may.
Yeah, let's get to it.
So I grew up around an auto parts business, family owned business, and I tell people, well, I knew how to sell you a part. I knew how to look it up in a catalog. If you remember those, you probably don't, but I didn't know what they did. I didn't know what the parts were. Right? I could look you up an oxygen sensor for your 1994 Accord, but I didn't know what it did. I just knew that you needed it, and I could probably have it in stock and sell it to
Well, that was the back in the day when all you needed to do was know like the first three part numbers, and you could flip to
you.
that page. Oh, I know what you're talking about, and then you're like, okay, I'm in 959s now, and you're looking down. Oh, that's what it was, and it's like you start memorizing those part numbers. Is like, and those were the guys you go to those part stores, and they're like, oh, and they flip it up, and they already knew the first three numbers, and they had it looked up in 5 minutes. Like,
Yep,
well, that was
yep.
rad.
Yeah, and I want to say, because of the industry I'm in, I had the misfortune, I have the misfortune of having a dad who is a, kind of jack of all trades, was a body mechanic, then became, ran like a machine shop out of the back of my grandpa's auto parts store where he was like turning brake rotors, and pressing bearings and things like that. But a guy who could pretty much fix most things in a car himself. And I say that's a bad thing for me ending up in this industry because, at first it was like always a comparison to, well, my dad could change my brakes for $40, right? Why am I charging
Yeah.
somebody 550, so that, I mean, that was a struggle for me, but, fast forward past that, I was a golf pro for like 12 years. No, not 12 years. Sorry, 8 years. And I had a dream of playing professional golf, but more importantly, I worked in private country clubs for quite some time. And I think when I got into this field, that was a huge benefit for me because you know I, the level of service and the standards for excellence that you have to provide to members of a high end country club are kind of the opposite of what I envisioned the automotive industry in my head. And fortunately, that became a huge asset because I got into the field. I guess as of next month, it'll be 13 years ago, and I really couldn't accept the product that we were putting out in terms of the customer experience, and so I think I just kind of quickly forced the organization to move to differentiate ourselves in terms of what we offer, right, and in terms of the customer experience, and that started out with improving literally just the initial interaction with the customer, and then that evolved to perks, like Uber rides and pickup and delivery of the cars, and just kind of it's just kind of evolved a long way from where we started. um, and
It's so much more than just making sure that the car's fixed.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know.
and for us, right? For guys like
Hmm.
us, for a lot of folks, it's not. For a lot of folks, it's, take it or leave it. I'm going to show up wearing, these dirty, ripped up clothes, and my shoes are falling apart, and I'm going to probably fix your car for half the price of what the guy up the street is, and obviously we fight that forever and ever and ever.
Well,
Um,
there's a lot of stuff too that they do behind the scenes that no one knows, and I think that's been my pain point too. Is especially being a transmission builder, there was a lot of times you pull them apart and a sealing ring land is worn, or the pump's out of spec, or there's just things that happen that you got to machine them or lay them or go look for another part, and you spend hours in the looking for whatever you're looking for to replace, when the other trans with the same exact model, you don't have to do that, right? So I guess my point is I would spend a lot of time doing these extras that no one in the world but me would know. And for some reason in my own head, I'm like, that's what makes me worth money because I'm fixing these things right the first time. Like, but nobody knows. And then you had the other side of the coin is like you're going to call the client every time you run across an obstacle and inconvenience them with what you're doing. Like, yeah, but that's where you're selling your service, right? Like you're not bothering them. You're
Right.
providing them now the experience is like, hey, so I ran across this problem and this is what I'm going to do to fix it. It's like the same thing as instead of marking your parts down to give someone a break, you just write it as a line item as a discount. There's so much more value in saying, hey, I discounted your repair order $75, $100, whatever, versus, hey, I took, my 60%, my 65% markup down to 44%. Like they don't, what?
Right.
It's so much more value seeing that line item as like there's $100 discount on your order, not like, well, it was going to be 500, now it's 450. Okay, says who, So that's been a big pain point for me.
Well, what do you mean? How's that been a pain point in terms of?
Well, just wrapping my head around that thought process, and understanding that I'm not inconveniencing a client by giving them that information. I can show a discount, and that would provide more of a service in what I'm trying to provide versus trying to say, oh well, I took my percentage off, or hey, I spent all night building that transmission, even though you don't know about it, and it's just something that I knew about, but they didn't know about it. And I just in my own head I'm like, oh, I'm the greatest because I made this thing work, but no one in the world knows it but me. I think a lot of people are in that world.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So I started kind of just mentioning what I think I brought to our business because the fact is, again, like I said, I started there 12 as of next month to be 13 years. And I remember like yesterday, we hired a guy to come and do a sales training or just some sort of motivational talk, if you want to call it that. And he had done some secret shopping of our shops prior to this meeting. So we get into this group setting, and he's presents to us not only our secret shop phone calls but also some others, right? And we hear one, and I mean, you could not make this up. It was like he called a local gas station. Hey, is Mitch there? Wow, no, Mitch is in the can right now. It's like, you just said that to a customer on the phone. And as I learned more and been around the industry obviously for longer, it's like, that's real. That happens still to this day, right? I
All
mean,
the time, yeah.
it's unbelievable how low the bar is set, and I think that I'm of a mindset that people will pay more for a better experience, right? And I think almost exponentially more. And that's, I mean, forget auto repair, right? That's in anything we do, right? I mean, why do I go to Whole Foods instead of Harris Teeter or Food Lion? I know they're going to charge me double, but I like the product and I enjoy the experience, and I might, have a little remorse thereafter, but you know, generally speaking, I know what I'm getting into. I've been there 100 times. Yes, I know they're charging me more, and I'm willing to pay it, right? And I think that that's something that's hard for a lot of business owners to accept, right? I mean, the experience is part of it, and I think that when I look at the reviews and the customer feedback that we get, generally the highlights are about how the people were treated and about their experience. No one's ever talking about how great a job we did replacing their water pump, to your point, right?
Right.
Or they don't see that.
Right. They torqued all the bolts to spec. Like how would they like I mean, I get it like as a tech, like 100%. That's your job as a technician, right? And that's our job as shop owners to hire the technician that has that mindset, right? That's behind the scenes though. But when it comes to the counter and like trying to provide that experience, that that kind of goes without saying. But at the end of the day, if the job goes right, the job goes right. But I mean, that's all about management. Like, do you want the technician that torques every fastener to spec? Sure, we all do, right? But it's all about the SOPs that you have in place to make sure they're following, the repair process or whatever it is, but that's regardless of what the client sees. They have no idea. They just, and you're not going to get everyone right. You're going to have something come back. How are you going to deal with that when a vehicle leaves and something goes wrong, whether it be the fault of the technician or not? That's where you really shine. That's where you get, how are you going to handle that? You going to answer the phone like, oh, now what is it? Or no, we didn't do that. That's not our, what? There's no way. I put that pump on myself. There's no way it's leaking. Like, really? You're going to like, that's how you want to start this?
Right.
And you see it all the time.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, and to your point about that, right? I mean, I feel like, um, you know, it is the worst practice imaginable to get defensive, right? When you don't even know what's wrong, right? I mean,
Right.
how many times? And surely, I'm sure at some point in my career I was that way, but I mean, it's like it makes my blood boil when I hear my staff members, not only getting defensive but talking about like potential additional diagnostic fees and things like that for a vehicle that you just worked on. It's like, why would that ever even come into your mind or become part of a conversation? I want to tell you about, our shop is high volume. And when I say high volume, I mean, that's a relative term, but we've got 8 locations. And when I started, we had 4. And high volume, meaning, our flagship location would work on, 8 to 900 cars a month.
Well,
Well, we did this awful, awful experiment that lasted for way too long, with something called Groupon. Surely you've heard of it. I know you have. I'm
oh yeah.
being funny. Well, that was our way to increase our car count, drastically. And I mean to the point of, I think we sold 10,000 Groupons for oil changes, right? So me just kind of getting my foot in the door, my initial experience was exactly this. Customer comes in with a Groupon oil change. You check them in. You have little to no conversation. You dispatch the ticket into the shop. Oh, by the way, we had I mean, 0 general service technicians. We had nothing but A and B level technicians because we had this mentality that the A tech is going to check the car out better than a general service guy. Well, of course that's real, but is it practical? No, right? I mean, and the technicians, of course, hated it, and the advisors hated it because the results prove themselves, right? It would be, 1 out of 15 people even cared what you had to say, anything about their car, right? But I bring it up because the method was, okay, check them in, little conversation, dispatch a ticket to the technician. Technician gives you a huge write up for everything under the sun that this car could possibly need. Advisor sits down, builds an estimate with no communication to the customer whatsoever. They're there in their mind for an oil change, and then you approach them in our lobby with a $3,000 estimate for things that they don't care about or didn't know they needed or don't believe that they need. And I watched this exercise go on for so long, and I'm just like, this is absolutely the definition of insanity. Every review we would get that was negative was describing what I just said. So, I thought to myself, I mean, I didn't have anything to compare to, right? I didn't know any other automotive repair shop. I just knew ours. And I thought to myself, we have to do something drastically different. And really, I think it starts at the intake process. So, I kind of just taught myself to ask what I thought were qualifying questions when people come into the shop, right? My favorites, even to this day, are, do you follow the factory maintenance schedule? Where do you take your car when you need repairs? How long do you plan to keep the car? And I assume these are questions that everybody asks, or something along those lines. And then I also figured out that asking questions after receiving the information from the technician became critical, right? Because, I love to use my dad as an example as an auto repair customer, as I mentioned before. My dad has never changed brake fluid on any vehicle he has ever owned, nor will he ever, right? And if he comes into our shop 10 times for an oil change and I try to sell him a brake fluid flush every time, I have failed. right? Because is it is it really my job to keep trying to force information upon him that he doesn't want? Or is it my job to understand how he wants us to help him take care of his car, right?
Right, right,
And
right.
I think you have repair customers and then you have maintenance customers, and there's a really obvious line in the sand between those two, in my opinion. Um,
Yeah, you got
do you
to
follow? I mean,
you got to give them what they want. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of the talk of like that's not my client, right? I mean, I'm guilty of it. You know, when we fire customers or fire clients, but I feel like there is a difference between and not good or bad, but when you go from the one location to MSO, right? There's a difference in what works and what you have to change. And I think as a one man show, you have a lot of flexibility as far as like what you want in the door, right? Like you can say no a lot to like pretty
sure,
much anything you know, you can really like whittle it down and you're like, cool, this is all I work on. And you get kind of this ego of like, oh, look at me, I'm Mr. Badass, you know? And you start getting yourself booked 2-3 weeks out and you're like, what do you mean you're slow? I don't get it. But between that and then you go to like 4 or 5 locations, I'm nowhere near that, right? I'm in the process now of getting a second um shop set up, so I'm really diving in and sinking my teeth into these different practices and realizing that okay, so the way we operated and for the last 5-6 years has to change drastically, but we have to start implementing different things. And like you said, there's the different types of clients. There's going to be the preventative maintenance ones and then the repair. You can't you can't have both with the same tactics, if that makes sense.
no, of course, no, I mean, I absolutely agree. Um, and so I mean, that's an area that I struggle with. Based on what I just kind of described to you, our business model is to attract a very, very, relatively speaking, high volume of cars, right? And my company floods the market with discount oil changes. We flood the market with discount brake coupons, and I think in return, I mean, we have to accept what that's going to yield, right? That is not going to yield 1,000 of our ideal clients. That's going to yield probably, frankly, a small fraction of our ideal clients, right? And in saying that, well, just kind of blank there
How
for a
yeah,
second.
how does your intake process go? Do you I mean, so you have two different types of clients, right? And you obviously want to try to give the same experience for everybody, but as you're saying that there you have to divide and conquer, I guess, if you want to put it that way, as far as like you have your oil change clients and then you have your other clients that want to fix everything. Is there a process that you use to kind of split those up? Is that something the service advisors deal with, or you just kind of have a blanket SOP for every vehicle that comes in?
Well, it is a blanket SOP, and we have a check-in form. And by the way, I don't use it, but I mean we have it, and what it is. It's a safeguard for the people that are less experienced, right? It's a safeguard for your weakest link, and it entails some basic stuff, right? Obviously your name, your email, your phone number. I tweaked it at some point to kind of try to promote some of the things we have, loyalty program. I basically would ask a question. Do you know about our loyalty program? Right? You're kind of forcing a conversation to take place there. We would ask them, things like, where's your, does it have a wheel lock key? Where's it located? But I think the key to that check-in form is where we allow the customer to write out their concern. Right now, when I say I don't use it, I think it has a less personal touch. Obviously, right? If somebody's been to our shop 15 times, and I know them by their first name, and I know their kids, and I know, they just had a softball game yesterday. Do I really want them to fill out this form in front of me and write down their name again? Like, no, I think that gives a very impersonal touch. But at the same time, as I kind of just said, it is a safeguard for weak links, right? It's a safeguard for people who may not ask the right questions. And it really is actually a double-edged sword because we're in Virginia and Maryland, and Virginia requires an annual safety inspection. And one of the questions that we added to the form was, does your vehicle require safety or emissions? Now, I didn't choose to add that. One of my counterparts did. And the reason he chose to add it is because we miss them at times, right? We might miss that the inspections due. And of course, it's our duty to remind people of that. But I think the logic in actually adding that type of question to the form doesn't make sense to me, because the reason we did it is as a safeguard, meaning, well, if we still miss your inspection, you didn't ask for it. Well, that's not helpful, right? I mean, you're not gonna go back to this person and say, here, look at this form. You didn't ask for it. I mean, I don't feel like that solves any problem, right? But
I
not
see.
to get
That
stuck
makes
in the
sense.
weeds, not to get stuck in the weeds
Yeah.
on that. There's definitely obviously a benefit to something like that. But there's, again, the obvious downside of, I don't want Mr. Smith, who was just here yesterday, to have to tell me who he is again, right? So I say I don't use it because I know that I'm going to interview the customer properly. I know that I'm going to ask them the right questions, but it is definitely helpful for some folks who are maybe green and may not do the same.
Well, and on like having SOPs and having multiple locations, you obviously want to make sure that those questions are being asked of especially new clients that are coming in. So you don't want to miss that, right?
Hmm.
But if you're there running the counter, you have a seasoned staff that you've trained. Those types of questions are going to get handled right. You're going to set expectations correctly. But without having something written down, it's really hard to even standardize that to begin with. So yeah, I mean it kind of goes back to the DVIs too. Is like when you present all this information, it's overwhelming to anyone if they're not expecting it, you know. And sure, pictures are great, but who says that's the picture of their car? No one's ever seen the underside of their car, so how how do they even know it's theirs, right? So there's that all that information that's out there that really it's transparent, but it still leaves a lot on the table to be misinterpreted. And I mean that's part of the problem with that too is overwhelming and not setting expectations, not saying, hey, so when you bring your car in about an hour, we're going to send you this report with a whole lot of information on it. So be prepared, and just want to let you know you don't have to do this stuff, but you need to be aware of it, And I think that's just the communication part of it and setting that experience up correctly. Because if I went to an oil change shop and I wouldn't know anything, and I've been there before when I was younger. I'd take my vehicle in to get smogged or before I did any repairs myself. I can only imagine if they came out to me with $3,000 worth of stuff. I'm like, hold on a second. I had to save up this $150 for this oil change. I don't have that kind of money. So it makes you feel like they're taking advantage of you. And that's like the whole problem with the industry is that we're all crooks and we're all trying to take advantage of somebody. And then you present something like that and it just enforces that thought. And in my opinion, anyway, that's what it seems like.
No, I agree. I agree, and I mean, I can't. As I talked about being high volume again, I use that term relatively, but what I can say is I've certainly operated and worked in numerous of our facilities. One great problem we have is the phones ring off the hook, right? Because we do a lot of marketing, and I used to, when I guess I would say, was most effective, or I shouldn't say that, when I had a staff, more of a staff that maybe would allow those conversations that those first touches to go last longer. I used to ask exactly kind of what you're just saying, right? I would set the expectations up over the phone, right? I still try to do that, but I can tell you, it can get hard if you're understaffed, or you know, things are rocking and rolling, right? And your phones are going crazy. Maybe you don't have 3 minutes to spend on every phone call when
That
somebody's
makes
calling in
sense.
for an
Yep.
appointment.
Right.
But I do think that that's probably one of the number one ways to positively impact the initial touch point with the customer, right? When somebody calls and says, "Hi, I'd like to get an oil change," and I'm like, "Okay, do you want 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock tomorrow?" And they're like, 10 o'clock, and I hang up the phone. Like, that's not ideal. right? Do I know if the person's been there? Well, I mean, technology allows us to kind of work on the fly and figure that out and run their phone number in the database, or maybe you know who the person is by the name of the caller ID, or whatever it may be. But for me, the most logical way to field an incoming appointment request is to say the same exact things that you're going to talk about when they walk in, right? Again, it's just when you think about efficiency, is that really practical? But I can tell you one of my favorite things to ask customers when they call for an appointment, or I shouldn't even say ask them, to let them know, is that, okay, you want an oil change? Great. I'm going to sign you up for an oil change and a multi-point inspection. We're going to give your vehicle a good once over. And I love to ask them, is there any complaints or concerns that you have with the vehicle? And I can't tell you how many times somebody doesn't give you any feedback, but then they walk in after they thought about it for the past 4 hours or the past 2 days, and then they let you know some information that they weren't going to initially. And
Right.
I think that's definitely a good way to kind of break through. And I also think, kind of to back up to what I was saying before about the Groupon concept, or forget the Groupon concept, just the high volume of oil changes concept. It's so easy to take the path of least resistance, right? It's easy when the person walks in. Oh, hey, Mr. Smith, you're here for an oil change. Great. It's going to be about an hour. I'll let you know as soon as it's ready, right? I mean, I don't, whether he's been there 10 times or never been there, for me, we have to ask the qualifying questions. We have to mention the multi point inspection. And I think that is something that is just taken for granted. Like, I don't assume that any customer walking into our doors knows anything that we're about to do to their car. Okay, yeah, you want an oil change? Sure. We're going to change your oil in your filter. Let's assume that's a given. Do they know that you're going to check their brakes? And I can also tell you, by talking about that, that has helped us kind of draw the line between some of the customers that don't want the information that you have to present, right? So many times I mention to people we're going to do a multi-point inspection, and they say they don't want it. Now, the question I ask you, because I realize, maybe you're not in the same atmosphere with the high volume of low dollar tickets, but if somebody said to you they don't want your DVI, or they don't want you to do a multi-point inspection, do you just send them packing at that moment in time, or do you service their car?
Honestly, typically, yeah. I mean, and to that point, that was kind of drawn me to was our process, and our process is to was really to get the vehicle. And being a transmission specialist, we were looking at big tickets, high ARO, high HPRO, and that's what I wanted. I wanted these vehicles to come in to be on the rack for at least a day. I Technicians are busy for a day. I knew each car was going to be at least 8 to 10 hours, and that was how I've built our process is based around that. And that started with, okay, well, it's coming in because it needs a transmission. That's right off the bat 8 hours, like minimum, right? And that's if we're just doing a swap. That's not if I'm pulling it out and I'm rebuilding it, putting it back in, right? So I already had this thought of like, okay, so every vehicle that comes in is probably going to tie up the rack for 8 to 10 hours, but I also want to make sure when we're done, because we don't get to drive these things when they come in, that when we let it off the rack and we drive off, the water pump's not leaking, the rear differential's not making noise. There's not a bunch of problems. So I implemented the fact that when it comes in, we're going to do a full sweep and we're going to charge you for that, because I don't have time to deal with that on the back end. And that was kind of my thought. Like, look, if you're going to spend $6,000 or $7,000 with me on this vehicle, and you leave and you have multiple leaks, or you got a wheel bearing bad, you're going to be pretty upset that you have to come back and spend more money. So let's all get it captured at one time. And for that, I'm going to charge you for this upfront 1 hour inspection. And we're going to go through everything. We're going to make sure everything's good so there's no problems. And that really came down because of the issues that I had before. That's what would happen. You'd come in, all right, get it on the rack, get it pulled out, let's get it built, get it back in, off the road, and then text would come back, hey, this thing's got a bunch of noise coming out of and there's something going on. And now it's like that just hung the whole process up. So as we evolved over time, I've taken that inspection process and molded it into, okay, if you want to come in and play ball with us, I need to know that you're willing to maintenance your vehicle. And so I need to know that you're willing to allow us to look it over and find everything that it needs, and then get you, not hard sell you, but at least get you a list of everything that it needs and say, look, so you're in here today because your check engine light's on, but I also need you to know that your water pump's leaking, and your differential fluid's bad, and whatever else it is. And that way we're all on the same page, and it just kind of like, I guess, cost of entry, if you want to call it that. And so, yeah, to your question, if they came in and they don't want to do that inspection, it's like, okay, well then I have three other shops I can send you to. What are you looking to do? And I mean, that's realistically how we operate day to day to this point right now. And that's something that I'm actively looking into. How do we capture these lost sales that we're getting, because they're not all bad, and you think, a lot of people think, oh, the oil change people, the discount oil change people, they're the bottom feeders, right? It's like, no. I mean, some of them are just intelligent enough to fix a lot of stuff on their own. Maybe they are, they have a, a dad that can help them or whatever it is, and they just want the convenience. And if we can get them in and show them our process for, for that discounted in quotes rate, and it's like we might capture future business. So I definitely see the hole that I've created, and that's why it's interesting to hear these other takes, especially from a high volume shop, because it's like, well, how do we implement some of this stuff to capture what we're missing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and I think that um, you know giving. I have this thought at all times, in terms of what we do, and it's basically like I said before, it's giving people information that they want. Now, of course, there's an ethical side of that, right? Like, but if we, so we attract a high volume of cars. If I have somebody that walks in and says they just want this coupon oil change and they don't want us to check out their car, well, then I can tell you what we do. I kill the MPI off the ticket and I write the same statement every time, and it says oil change and check safety items only, right? Because that's basically my way of relaying to the technician, well, we're still going to service this car, right? But we're not going to tell him his 30, 60, 90K service. We're not going to tell him anything other than what I would consider to be safety requirements. And why? Well, I think the reason's kind of obvious, right? The reason is it's just kind of our CYA, right? I mean, um, and to me, I'm constantly torn on those types of people, but I can tell you that we are also in the game of reputation management, right? So if we choose that we are going to attract this high volume of clients, and not every customer wants to do business with us the way we want them to, we kind of have to accept that. You know, not only do we have to accept that, but we have to realize that what, just because the customer in front of me is a guy who's going to replace his own brake pads and rotors in his driveway on Sunday, doesn't mean he doesn't have a friend he might refer to us, right? Doesn't mean he may not write us a good review, right? And those are things that we have to consider.
Tons, yeah, tons of opportunities.
Yeah, I will say where I do draw the line, and unfortunately I've had this happen more times recently than I can recall ever in the past. Where I do draw the line is where customers have a history that shows us that they're oil change only customers, right? And we're going to have those. But when there are very obvious safety infractions that I don't even think they should drive off the lot, right? When I encounter that, and and they don't care, or they're not interested, or they have somebody always who's going to do it cheaper, those are the kind of people I try to separate from, mostly because I worry about the liability, right? Like, we just did your discount oil change for $20, and I'm telling you that your tie rod is loose enough that it's going to break if you make a sharp enough turn, and you don't care about that. Well, I do care about that, and I'm concerned what happens hereafter, right? And of course, we know the horror stories of you were the last people that worked on it, right? Like, we changed your oil in your filter and we told you had a problem, and now you broke down on the side of the road and you think it's our fault, right?
Right.
So I mean, that's again, that's kind of the bad with the good scenario. I also,
It's kind of like risk management every time.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And so I actually I have a hard time even relating to the the higher end European, or even as you described, the transmission shop, right? Because people are coming to you like for a specific problem that they know that you're going to help them resolve, right? And I, I don't know that I've never been in that atmosphere, so I don't know that it's just as easy as one, two, three, and they trust everything you say and they're ecstatic about the price. I mean, tell me about that because I I, I want to think that
I
it's
think for the most part, and that's hard too, because it's like don't give prices over the phone, and it's like, well, hold on a second here, and I think it's funny you brought that up because I've noticed Euro shops and transmission shops, and I'm sure there's other ones in the mix there, but those two really have a lot of similarities when it comes to processes because the prices are the same generally as far as like your ticket order and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of similarities I've found talking to. I don't do Euro work at all, but it seems to be pretty similar. But yeah, they call around, they want a price, and so typically before the vehicle's brought in on the hook, they got a pretty good idea what they're going to be spending. I mean, it's pretty common that they're going to be calling around. Most people aren't going to just say, "Oh, it's 7 grand, sounds good. When can you do it?" They got a pretty good idea of what the price should be. Pretty rarely they gets towed in on the hook and they're wondering. That's what I try to talk them into though, because I can't tell you how many times they've been convinced that it needs a transmission. They've done their shopping around, and I'm like, look, just get it in here, let me look at it, and it ends up being something, not with the transmission at all, or something that we can repair without having to remove the trans out of the vehicle. So there's that part of it too, where you got to kind of talk them into it, talk down their anxiety, and say, look, just get in here, spend a couple bucks with me, and let's see if we can get this thing on the road without spending that kind of money. And I think once they call around and see what they're looking to spend, that makes them feel a little bit more, okay, I'll give you a chance. I'll let you see what else you can maybe find on it. But um, to the point of like the ticket at the end and dealing with that high volume, that's when it really takes time to talk to them and like slow everything down. I worked as a smog technician right out of high school, so I'm very familiar with the high volume style shop. I didn't own it then. I worked at a smog shop, but we did between 30 and 40 smogs a day. It's probably the same as safety inspections on your side. In
yeah.
California, we have,
Same.
the
We do emissions too. So yeah.
okay. So yeah. We would roll about 40. It was basically for an hour that I would be rolling through. So I was like very familiar with get them in, get them out, get a process in, and make sure like everything's moving, and then that went from there to the transmission shop, and it was like a totally different atmosphere, totally different, slows everything down. We're focusing on one person, and that's I was like I like that. That was like more my pace. We can like establish this relationship. I get to know who they are. But obviously, over the years now, I've realized that our client base is pretty small, and that's because of we're spending a lot of time with each client, and then they go to a discount oil change, and then they end up finding a general repair shop that's not transmission specialist, and then we're losing that client because then once they're there, then they get sold everything else, and if it needs a transmission in the future, most General Auto can replace, do a trans swap. So it's tough. It's definitely tough, and I don't think there's one right way or another. It's just my experience through the years.
So I mean, do you do any marketing, or how do you attract new
Yeah,
clients?
yeah. Marketing in the early stages was like shop to shop. I mean, that's basically I get a lot of referrals from other shops, and then word of mouth. Lately, I've been really diving into marketing, and I've had a lot of learning, like trying to deal with different marketing companies, and then just started doing mailers. I do a radio show that helps a little bit. But man, marketing's tough. I that is I'm intrigued by it. I like the idea of coming up with like creative ideas and like ads, but I've never been a coupon style marketer where I'm like, "Oh, $50 off, come on in." I don't like that. It just feels like we're discounting our just to anybody. If they come in and they're a return client, I got no problem. Like, I'll help you out. This, that, and the other thing. You got everything together, and you got um, a combined labor discount or something like that. But just to, like, for the masses, throw out a discounted price, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I
But
mean, well, I mean, how many cars do you work on in an average month?
car count's probably between 40 and 60 a month.
So these are still
So
all transmission jobs, or mostly all transmission jobs.
no, we've definitely pivoted probably about, we're probably close to 70-30 at this point, 70% being general.
Yeah, I mean, I think marketing for me is just about identifying what does your ideal client look like, right? And of course, your marketing strategy is going to be light years different than what ours is, right? And we've been doing,
That's a great point to bring up too, because I think a lot of us look for help and then try to see what other shops are doing and say, oh, I'll do that. But like you said, it's totally different, right?
yeah, I mean, it's not even comparable. And I'll tell you something. I was heavily involved in producing our marketing, and by that I mean direct mail pieces, which we flood our surrounding areas, with direct mail. And when I say we flood the surrounding area, I mean I know you told me you're at Central Coast, California. I can't picture in my head what population looks like there, but I can tell you in the DC metro, I mean, we have a shop in Alexandria that I think within 1 mile radius, there's probably 100,000 people, right? I mean, it's insane. So I mean, our method of, going back in time when I had a pretty, a pretty significant hand in creating our marketing pieces, I was more about trying to sell our brand, right? So we would come up with these entire, 8 by 11 or whatever the size is, like a whole full sheet of paper postcard. And we would dedicate one side to education. And, I thought that that was pretty valuable and pretty impactful, but it's hard to measure that, right? Because it's really, it's just impressions, right? Nobody's walking in with this and saying, here, I just learned about how the air conditioning system works in a car and I'd like to do business with you, right? But
Right.
surely that happened. And so it's funny for me when I look back and look at what we used to create kind of in house and, versus where we are now. I think, it's hard for me to quantify a number because I don't know the exact number, but I would just say that, probably more than 50% of our business is based on retention marketing, right? And even though we're in a very transient area where I think the population, literally turns over every 7 years. But, we came up with, I mean, it's not rocket science. We came up with the oil change reminder, the inspection reminder, the BG service every 2 year reminder, the tire reminder based on the mileage you drive and how long the tires are supposed to last, and the alignment once a year, and your brakes were done 30,000 miles ago. I mean, basic stuff. There's no wheel to reinvent here, right? It's at least I don't think there is. I think that there's those core services that drive our business that we are going to be able to predict when people need them, and hopefully get better at predicting when people need them and provide insight that's valuable that drives them back into our shop. But when you think about that concept, right, again, it's mostly impression based, right? I don't think, if I go back in time, I'd say, 10 years ago, we would, maybe it was a declined service, or it was, we had done a brake job previously, and we would send them a coupon for their, what we anticipated was their next brake job. And people would come in and say, hey, I got this coupon. I'd like you to check my brakes, and so on. Now it's so much less of that, and I have to believe it's the same across our industry. Whereas, we're giving people valuable information, but there isn't necessarily an offer attached to it, or there isn't necessarily an offer that they act upon. But somewhere along the line, we reminded them, 2 or 3 or 4 times that their brakes are coming due, and they're not walking in and saying they need brakes, but it just keeps us fresh in their mind, right? And I think that's that the customer retention piece is, it's hard to measure, right? But I mean, again, when you think about a place like our flagship location that could do 1,000 or 1,100 cars in a month. I mean, that's absolutely critical. And of course, you can measure it just by comparing to yourself, right? Um, I imagine in a in a setting where you're specialized in transmissions, or you say 70% of the cars come in for transmission work. Um, there's that's a whole different ball of wax in terms of how you market to people. And in my mind, I mean, I don't know. I don't direct mailers. Again, that would have to be impression based, because you think about the amount of cars on the road and the amount of people the amount of drivers that there are, and just how often does someone need a transmission replaced, right? It's not very often,
Yeah, it's a
right?
it's a different mindset they have. It's not, they're not scheduling their next service. They're something something catastrophic happened, and they're on the phone, online, on the side of the road. Where do I take my car right now? And if you're not top of mind, you better be top of Google. And that's
Right.
kind of like, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, that's there's no way around saying anything other than that. And I think it makes it tough for retention because of the amount of pain they go through when they come in. And I think that circles back to like the 300% rule in the DVI inspection. And if every time your client comes in, they're spending 3,000 or $3,500, they don't really want to come in anymore. And if they go to another shop and they spend $200 or $300 every time they go there, it doesn't, it's tough because I'm trying to provide the right thing. I'm trying to tell them the right thing. You don't want their tie rod to break off. You want to make sure it's safe. You want to make sure you're yeah, there's the sales point. So we want to make sure you're capturing everything so the next shop doesn't, capture it and become the hero. But also you want to make sure it's safe, and you want to make sure, hey, there's clients out there that really want every single drip to be fixed. They don't want anything with their car. They don't want anything to worry about. And it's hard to know who's going to be who. So you just say, you know what, I'll just blanket everything gets the 300% rule. We're just going to do the DV on everything. But then they come in and they spend $2,500 or $3,000, and you're like, man, every year I come in, it's this huge bill. I go to this other shop, and it's an oil change, and maybe he tells me I need brakes, and that's it. And he doesn't. They don't go through the air filter, the cabin air filter, or check, power steering flush, brake fluid flush. They don't add all that stuff on there. And I think it just changes, um, for one, client expectations. Now they feel like, well, that's all my car really needed, so that other shop must have been ripping me off, right? I think that's part of the problem too, and that makes it really hard because I mean, if I go to every time we go to the dentist, it sucks, right? So we don't like going to the dentist. But if you went and all I did was a cleaning and it wasn't uncomfortable, you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. I'd probably go there again. It doesn't really matter how much you got charged. It's the fact that like it was uncomfortable for you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um, you're kind of hitting me in a sweet spot there, because you know there's uh, an unwritten rule, at least in my mind, in our industry. No, it's a written rule for me, right? If you, as the service center up the street, makes a recommendation to a customer, right, and they come to me for a second opinion, don't you? We are dying. We're dying to tell them that they don't need that, right? They don't need it, right? That guy was lying to you, and and I, that exists so much, so often. It's like self defeating, right? And by the way, I mean, if a customer comes into my shop with a leaking oil pan gasket, as an example, I mean, it's my job to assess a severity, right? Call it a
Hmm.
1 to 10 or whatever you want to. But it's almost like when they come to our shop after someone else pinpointed this, that 1 to 10 scale like wants to change a little bit, right?
Oh yeah,
Um,
tech to tech, shop to shop. I mean, you could have a team of 10 technicians all do a DVI and they're going to have 10 different outcomes. It's like
yeah,
so you go to another shop and it's like the level of severity and then what's in your mind and do you need it? What do you mean by do you need it? It's like
hmm.
when's the next time you're planning on being at an auto shop? Because if it's in 2 years, then you need it today. But if it's in 6 months, you can probably wait. So there's that, right?
Well, I hate the word need. I really hate it because again, I can circle back to my dad a million times over when I think about the worst auto repair customer you could have. What does need mean? Right? Because my dad would tell you if he drove his car in, he doesn't need anything, right?
That's fair.
And
Yep.
and obviously, it's up to us to decipher that and relay that in a way that makes sense. But I really don't like ever use that word. I don't ever use the word need because I feel like, that's like a pressure word. That's a pressure tactic. And, I mean, I don't know.
No,
It's
I
like,
get it. Yeah,
you
you don't
know,
need it. I'm just recommending it.
right. And it's like, also when someone asks you, you tell them, again, your oil pan gasket's leaking. Well, how long do I have? Like, I don't know until you're on the side of the road with a tow truck,
Until you run out of oil. I don't know. Till
right.
it stops leaking because then you're out.
But I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, I don't know. I despise that. I despise the word because it's dangerous, and using, to me, it's just about relaying the information. And so, that leads me to want to talk about digital inspections. And, I think I actually, I either linked up with you or, saw maybe something you posted in one of the groups on social media, and I've started partaking in them because I really want to see, what other people are doing. At some points in time, I feel like we've got it all figured out, and at some points in time, I realize we don't. And I like to talk about the digital inspection because I have a very specific process that, of course, I think is the best, right? I think it's the best, and I have a hard time understanding if anyone does not understand my process, right? So my process for the digital inspection is this. Number one, um, well, number one would be, just basically once the technician completes the digital inspection, I want to have a phone call with the customer, right? And my phone call is just simply to touch on the highlights of that. I do believe there's a lot of shops out there that, maybe prepare the customer at drop off or whenever it might be, and then just kind of fire off that information. But for me, that's not advising, right? At that point, you're not advising. You're just kind of you're giving them a bunch of information and letting them decide what's most important, right? That's number one. Number two, I am firmly set in an information only setting, right? I am not going to build up a bunch of estimates and attach it to every line item on that DVI and send it off to a customer. Why? Because I want their buy in on that, right? I want to talk to you and okay, so you've got 120,000 miles and you haven't followed the factory maintenance schedule for 10 years and you quote unquote need spark plugs or you need struts, you need tires, you need brakes, or all these things are recommended by the technician. I want to get a feedback from the customer to determine what they care about, right? And I think that, if you do a quality digital inspection on an older vehicle that has not been well maintained, it is easy to write an estimates totaling five or seven or $10,000 and just completely baffle somebody and blow them out of the water. So for me, I just want to share information only. So my process is I get the inspection back from the technician. Of course, I review it, I edit it, right, to number one, align with the service history, not only in our system, but in Carfax, to make valid mileage and time based recommendations. I, of course, clean up the verbiage. As you know, the technicians don't like to write the best sentences and statements. But more importantly, I want to talk to the customer. I want them to review that information, and I want to talk about what our game plan is going to be. Does that make sense to you before
100%. Oh
attaching
yeah.
any type of estimates at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that brings up a good point with depending on who the client is, and trying to have a process so that I'm not, or my wife's not involved with every single, vehicle. Not to say that it's, like we're too good for it. It's not what I mean. I just mean when you have another rider or service advisor that's working, you want to make sure that they're delivering the same expectations that we did. And some people love that online. You have shopware, right?
Hmm.
So this, I mean, I've had such a huge amount of success and a lot of positive feedback from that when they send them the portal and they're like, "Oh, that was so nice. I could click the link. I could look through what I wanted to do. I could click what I wanted, what I didn't want." And I think that gives them time to kind of in their own mind, with their own thoughts, figure out what they want to do, or go talk to their significant other or their dad or whoever is mechanically inclined, and be able to say, hey, what is, they can just make the decision on their own without any sort of outside influence. And then we make the phone call, after we see, because you can see when they open it up. So we wait 10 or 15 minutes, we give them a call. Um, and then we can have the conversation. Hey, we saw you open it up. What do you think? Like, any questions about anything? And so, yeah, obviously we got to have that conversation. We do it post that. Obviously we go through and make sure the DVI looks clean, and there isn't words like, hey, so I'm in the can right now, I'll finish it when I'm done, or whatever. So yeah, you got to clean it up and polish it a little bit and then send it out. But we just send them out, and then we wait for the replies. And in fact, at the end of the day, sometimes, that's what we'll do. Hey, we're going to send you over a DVI. We're out for the day. Your vehicle's going to be inside. It's locked up. Everything's good. You don't need it back. Okay, good. So we're going to send you over the inspection, go through it over, this evening, and we'll talk in the morning. And that's it. That's just our touch point. We don't really call and say, hey, so these are the things we found. Cause I've come to find that they want prices right away. And, and then I'm not going to hold you to it, but what do you think it's going to cost?
I, I can
Right.
help
And
you with
it's
that.
like, well, if you're not going to hold me to it, I don't really want, I don't know. Like, oh, and then you look kind of, ignorant, right? Like, oh, you don't know what it's going to cost to do a transmission service on that truck. It's like, no, not off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah,
that's,
but
that's
that
the expectation.
yeah, but that for me that comes back to a basic fundamental of controlling conversation, right?
Yeah.
And again, for me, one thing that I learned early on, in my time in this field was, when everything was just a phone call, there was no digital inspection, everything was a phone call, to not give prices as you go, right? And here's why. I mean, there's a reason why if you sit down in a restaurant, I mean, sure, the prices are probably listed on the menu 99.9% of the time. But do you ask the server for a salad and then they're like, well, that's going to be $12.99, just so you know, right? And
Yeah.
can I get a lemonade? Well, just so you know, that's going to be $4, right? There's a reason they don't do that. And that's basically what we're doing in a sense. So I learned this, and it has stuck with me forever. And when I would call a client to discuss 4, 5, 12 ththings, I know the first thing they're going to ask me after I tell them, number one, you need ball joints. They ask how much it is. I say, you know what? I don't have the prices in front of me. Let me go through this information with you, and then we'll talk about the prices. Because what happens? They stop listening, right? You tell somebody you want to tell them 12 things about their car, and the first thing is $1,200. They're not listening anymore, right? They're literally just focused on the price. And so I've tried to kind of parallel that to the digital inspection process. So are you saying that when you send over the digital inspection, they've already got all the estimates included, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, I love talking about this subject because I am so set in the idea that I want to relay information before I relay prices. Now, I also can say there's a big difference here, right? If you came in on a hook, right, and you need a transmission, like I'm not going to send you a digital inspection that says you need a transmission and then wait for you to communicate with me. I'm going to give you the estimate. But I guess I'm talking about the idea that, we are doing high volume oil changes and high volume touches, and I don't just want to share unwanted information, right? And so, I've not argued, but I mean, I've scoffed at the responses I've gotten to this in a public setting in some of these groups because I posted a question and I forget what group it was, and my question was, do you give customers estimates that they don't want, right? And what I mean is, if my dad makes it clear to me that he doesn't ever want to change his brake fluid, should I send him an estimate to change his brake fluid? Because I think he's going to think to himself, they're not listening to me, right? They're not paying attention to everything I've told them the last 12 visits, right? So, I mean, I guess there's the mindset of also, well, he's never going to buy it if you don't present it to him. But I don't know. I think that me giving my dad an estimate to change his brake fluid when he's told me every visit he's not interested in doing that, that's kind of a disservice. And I think, who knows where that falls on the DVI list. But I mean, if God forbid that's the first thing he sees, he's probably not listening to anything else I say. And
Yeah.
so
Yep.
it's a dicey subject, but it's something I believe pretty strongly in. And I think that, the DVI also, depending how much verbiage you put into it, really dismisses the idea of advising, right? Again, I'm trying in my head to parallel your business to ours, right? Um,
Well,
ours,
yeah, as I said, and like to your point of like with your dad coming in, and then you have the people screaming right now, like, well, then send that client out. If he ain't gonna follow our rules and he doesn't want to spend money here, and all he does is come in for an oil change, then he's not who we want in the door anyway. Okay, cool. Well, think about this. Your pops is pretty well educated, and he probably helps a lot of other people in the neighborhood with their vehicles. You think if you treat him right and you listen to him, you quit telling him he needs a brake fluid flush, maybe he's going to start recommending his friends that he helps out to your shop because, hey, these guys listen to me, right?
right?
And maybe that floods your shop with a bunch of people you don't want, but it's still opportunity either way. So I think that's important to kind of think about too. Like, I mean, especially for me, like instead of saying, you know what, you don't want to, spend this $100, then you're not coming into the shop. Like that's not how we play ball. You don't want to play with us, so that's fine. Go somewhere else. But then I'm missing all these opportunities of people like your dad that probably have a lot of educated friends, or maybe that he helps them out and he can recommend them to the shop. So it's definitely missed opportunities for sure.
Yeah, and and I mean, I mentioned that a little earlier because the fact is, I have customers like often that come into our shop, and we find out that they were referred by someone who came to us one time 5 years ago, and it's like, how did this come about, right? How did that happen? No idea. But the fact is, we obviously treated them right, and we did, we gave them what they asked for, right? And again, like I said, I hate to, but I like to continue to use my dad as an example. If I give him what he's asking for, right, and of course I have to satisfy our minimum requirements, right? If I see obvious safety infractions, I have to report them. But what I don't have to do is invest 30 minutes of my time, 20 minutes of my time, maybe even waste 30 minutes of his time creating all these estimates for services that he's not interested in, right? And I think that's that is absolutely paramount to me. And again, I might find out someday that I've got this all wrong. But I just, when I look at the high volume play, you have to listen to people's needs or wants and treat them accordingly, in my opinion.
I mean, I think you're right. I think there's two sides of the spectrum. I think you're more of that old school kind of feel, which is making, I think, a lot more strides right now because there's so much technology, and people are clients in particular coming in, and they kind of want that old feel of like they walk in and they're comforted. It's not all just automated everything. They want a little bit of interaction with someone who seems knowledgeable, that seems like their dad, right? That they come in like, oh, okay, I feel like he's gonna take care of me. And the two sides of the spectrum is, you have the ones that don't look at anything. It's in here for just the water leak. Just look at the coolant leak. That's all we're worried about. Don't worry about the rest of the vehicle. We don't want to, And then you have the other side of where it's like, we're gonna nitpick this car until there's nothing left, no stone left unturned, and we're gonna give this huge, $5,000 estimate. And I think there's a sweet spot right there in the middle. And it's really difficult to just make a blanket statement and just say this is what you have to do with every vehicle, because there's that spectrum in the middle there, and then you have the client that might want to have it a little bit heavy on one side or a little heavy on the other side. And it's hard to say who's right and who's wrong, because everybody's so damn different. Uh, who
Have,
knows? But the important thing is to be able to change. And I think that's the most important thing, is to be able to pivot and say, okay, we're getting a little heavy here. It's time to cut it back a little bit. And for me, especially having a heavy ARO and moving that, and we don't, I guess the percentage there, I was saying, we're definitely more heavy into general repair now. So we've definitely made a huge pivot in the last year. And that's kind of the numbers that we're getting now is basically just general auto repair. And I see the potential there, but then I'm also a little nervous using that kind of um what do you call it, template that we've been running in the general auto repair, because then I talk to you, and with multiple shops, and it's like, whoa, you're doing what with what? Like, I don't know, is this bad? Am I like building a house of cards right now? It's like, you know what I mean? Like, does that high ARO um ticket model really transition into the general service side? That's where I'm at.
well, since I know you edit this, by the way, please tell me to shut up at any point because I can literally talk for hours. Okay, but you know, I posed another question to one of the groups, right? And I said, and again, this is a loaded question. I said, would you rather have 500 cars with a $600 average ARO or 600 cars with a $500 average ARO? Now, I already know the answer that almost every single person is going to give. Of course, you want the less cars with the higher average, right? But
Right.
that is that answer is contingent upon other things like where's your business, right? What is your business model, right? So for us, again, transient area, turnover in population every 7 years, the whole population. Do I want 500 or 600 clients? I think I want 600, right? I'm pretty sure of it. You know, maybe I have that wrong. I mean, but I think that, um, I don't know. I just, sorry,
Well,
I
it
lost my.
depends on yeah, it depends on how your shop is set up, and if you can handle that and all that. But that's an interesting concept to think about. Is instead of looking at money and dollars, look at the people, and maybe
Well,
touching more people. Well, that sounded bad saying it like that, but maybe having,
well, listen, it's
getting
building
more
a
people.
pipeline, man. It's
What's that?
building a pipeline. It's building a
Right,
pipeline, right?
right.
And you know, and for me, I mean, think about the other things that you don't track, right? The word of mouth referrals or the reviews, right? Well, guess what? If I work on 600 cars instead of 500, and I do a great job on all of them, assuming I'm going to get more positive reviews out of 600 cars than 500, right? I'm going to get more word of mouth referrals out of 600 and 500. I'm going to get more chances that your son or your daughter is going to bring your car to us when they need something if I work on 600 and not 500, right? I mean, those are just things that are obvious to me. Um, yeah. So,
Those are, I mean, it's it's a good it's something to wrap your mind around when you're talking about marketing. So I think, like you said, when it comes to marketing, and you have the agency or your marketer ask you, "Hey, what is it your goal is?" "Oh, well, I want to, up my ARO, so I want to market to the rich neighborhoods, and I want to get the expensive cars in here." And I mean, that's what we want. We want the highest return on investment. And what is that in your mind? In my mind, is, well, you want to be able to have a vehicle come in and have them spend $1,200 to $1,500 on every visit. That's your fastest return on investment. Um, I mean, maybe I'm wrong there, but I think looking at the bigger picture, and like you said, if you can get maybe 50 more cars a month, and even though those tickets are maybe half of that, maybe they're 500, 600, you still have way more opportunity, and then you can lower your marketing budget because now you have more referrals going out.
Um,
It's definitely a positive thing.
there's two more things I want to touch on, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So, number one, um, is the God Almighty terrible, terrible concept of this. I want to use the word side work, but it's not really side work. It's just like backdoor deals, right? That our industry inherited and encourages, right? At some point, I don't know where or when this all came about, but I bring this up for a reason. Um, I I mean, I'm a golfer. I belong to a club. I have probably a group of 60 friends, right, that are all members of the club. And I mention that because, if there was ever people that you wanted to support your industry, support what you're doing, that's a good sector of people. The good sector being people that have enough expendable income that they belong to a country club, right? I mean, that's a great clientele to have. But I mention that because I don't know any different. All I knew from day one is I want to promote this business and I want my friends to support me. And I think, like compared to any other field, I mean, I don't know, you have a friend that works at an electronics store or, some sort of high end store where you might make a large purchase. Right? I think that you look to them for some sort of deal, right? I mean, of course, we all want a friend who can hook us up. But for some reason in our field, I mean, again, and having large, high volume shops just makes this much more relevant for me. It's like there's always this concept that the technicians have got to do their friend's brake job for nothing, right? And I struggle with this forever and ever because shouldn't your friends support what you're doing, right? I mean, we are providing an atmosphere uh, that allows a technician hopefully to flourish and to provide for his family and have a good life. And the end result is that he doesn't want to send his friend into the lobby, right, to check in as a normal customer to allow us to service their car to the highest standard like we do with every other client. Instead, they have this notion that they want people want something for free, and I brought that up because
Well, it feels like it's expected.
yeah, but think
Hmm.
about like what other industry. I mean, I try to do a comparison. If you want to, I don't know, if you want to put brake pads and rotors on your buddy's car that he bought or you bought for him and use the shop to do that. I mean, I don't want to have a fight about it, but what I do want to understand is the why, right? The why. Because, my comparison would be, am I going to show up to a restaurant that my friend works at and either, number one, bring my steak and ask him to cook it for me because I like the ambience, but I don't want to pay the money to be there? Or better yet, I mean, am I going to ask him to just give me a steak and bring it outside the back door, right? Like, I don't understand that,
I
and
guess
it's
I
like,
guess on that one it'd be the same. Like if they're hanging out at your house and you guys are having a couple beers and you're like, "Hey, bud, there's some steaks in the fridge. You want to cook them for me?" Like, and it's like, as awkward as that sounds, is like that's the same thing, isn't it?
but I mean, tell me this: do you have that experience within our industry? Because I have that every day of my life, and no matter how many policies we lay out, it's like people just, technicians want to buck the system, right? And then I don't understand why, other than to say that we created it at some point.
I mean, it's frustrating. I've gotten to the point where I just kind of, I guess you could say, turn a blind eye to it, or just accepted it for what it is. I mean, we allow, if they have their own car, their family cars, like, yeah, use the shop, man. Like, don't, I don't want you getting hurt. Like, if I can help you with what we have here, like, just bring it in and do it. But it's like, even with the family, you would think with family, they should want to support the business as well, because the business is supporting their children or their relatives, or right, like, I totally get your point. And it's just really hard, because if I don't offer the help, then it's just gonna go somewhere else and figure it out. And it's like, well, you know what, I'd rather just help that situation than fight about it. But yeah, every weekend they're going home, they got, they're helping their neighbors out, they're whatever's going on, and you know what, that's fine. Go make the cash. And I guess it comes down to not experiencing like your level of high volume, where I'm like, you know what, doesn't really matter to me. We have our client base. I'm not really worried about it, because um, if that's the money they want to spend, and that's the level of service that they want as a client, and that I'm perfectly okay with that. We're not here to provide that service. You know what I mean? If that makes any
Sure,
sense. So that's
sure.
kind of like where I come from. Um, and I can imagine getting to the point where you're servicing 1,000 vehicles a month, and then you see the numbers going down. It's like you're really starting to pay attention to every vehicle that's possibly being serviced by one of your own technicians. Um, on the side, and I get that, but I'm not there yet. But it's just tough. It's like, because what do you do? What can you say without causing friction? And that's the last thing I want to do, is like, I want to help you, so use the shop if you need it. That's kind of where I'm at.
That makes sense. How many bays do you have?
Five, an alignment bay, and four lifts.
And so again, right? You as a single, owner operator, way different than 8 locations, right? 8 locations forces you to have things like policies and procedures manual, and standard operating procedures, and every time you think of something, that is important to the organization, you have to share it and have people sign off on it, and
Oh yeah,
that.
we have similar protocols. I mean, everything from an, crank no start to a toe in to, I mean, everything has its own, procedure that I want to make sure everyone's following, so we're all on the same page. So I'm that type of person, though. I like putting those procedures in. I like knowing that, if there's an issue, I know where to step in, and I know where they're going to be in that process, because it's written down, hopefully.
Well, right,
But
but so so
yeah,
but to that point, do you have a written down policy for employee repairs?
I don't. That is not one that yeah, I guess trying to ignore that, I've ignored it.
Well, hey, again, sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? But again, I just approach this from an angle that we're good at what we do, right? Number one, you're the technician in our shop. Are we good at what we do? Yeah, we're checking that box. Okay, good. Number two, we're fair, right? Are we checking that box? Sure. Um, Number three, we're a retail establishment, right? So, are we going to charge your friend more than if they did it themselves? Obviously, right? But guess what? You know, those three principles, allow you to, have a pretty good life, right? So I don't need to elaborate on that anymore. It's just, I'm pretty passionate about that because, again, I know how I treat it, right? And I treat it as, I want my friends and my family to support this business, and I want to stand behind what I do enough that I feel good about that, right? I don't feel like I need to give away the farm every time you walk in, right? So the
Yeah.
the last thing that I want to talk about. So you use Shopware as well, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Um, and again, clearly different atmospheres for us both, but um, I will tell you that I have a struggle, and my struggle is when vehicles have a somewhat lengthy decline history, right? So lots of past recommendations that haven't been done. I find that the technicians, look at that and then change the way they evaluate a car, right? Because they have this preconceived notion that, well, this person's not going to do what we say. So, and I gotta be honest with you, I struggle with that because, I just recently moved locations and or changed locations and from our kind of our flagship that we built up enough that could survive without me, to a shop that needs some attention. And what I found is, even though we've only been using Shopware for a year and a half, there's a lot of bad data, right? And I say bad data, like, okay, if you recommended a coolant flush and a brake flush a year and a half ago, and then they declined it, that stays there. But then they came in again, and you wrote a new estimate, and next thing you know, there's like these previous recommendations for the same services 4 times over, and it's just like bad data in, bad data out. But I bring that up because I don't ever assume anything. I don't. I think my mission, as it pertains to what I just said, is basically to clean up that data, right? And figure out kind of what we've talked about. It's like, how do I figure out what this customer wants and how they want us to serve them? But it is a constant struggle for me when somebody walks in. It's like, well, I guess if I want this car to get checked out properly, I better just delete all of these previous recommendations that are there, right? Because otherwise, I'm going to get a rubber stamp or the bare minimum because, oh, they're not going to do anything anyway. And I look at most interactions as an opportunity or to hopefully say something that resonates with someone or do something differently than we've done in the past. And I'm just curious, have you experienced what I'm saying at all? I mean, does that make sense to you? Or
I do know what you're saying. I guess I haven't had that type of pain point with our technicians. Um, as far as them thinking about the selling side of it, I think they're really more concerned in the safety of it. And if they see something that has been recommended before and it still needs to be done, it's more like, I can't believe they haven't done this yet. And then, they're recommending it. So, um, but also our process, we make sure that our technicians are paid productivity for the inspection every time. So if the vehicle's in more than once a year, we're not doing a reinspection. It's you yearly inspection,
okay,
and then that's it. So then if 12 months go by, then we're doing a whole nother DVI on it. We're doing from scratch up, and they're paid. Right now we got them at point 0.6 for our standard basic, and then we do a full 1 hour, which is our elite inspection. Um, and they get 1 full hour for that, just for the inspection. And I think that helps a lot too. Even though the amount of detail that I expect, it takes an hour. I mean,
right, sure.
it does take an hour, but it's just an inspection. You're not really doing much. So as far as like manual labor, you're just looking at everything. So I think
And
that helps too, is just making sure that we give them the time that they need to actually do the inspection. But also for a shopware is fairly new. I think we got about 4 months into it, so that's probably another reason we don't have that much data collected yet to see how that's going to look on the backside. It's something I'm going to be checking out for though, because I'm not sure what that's going to look like.
well, I think just to kind of go back to what we were talking about earlier. I mean, I think the interviewing process as it pertains to that data, the previous recommendations, is kind of critical, right? Because you have to clean it up. Because if you don't, I think what we like to forget is you send that digital inspection off to someone, it's literally sending them not only what you recommend today, but every previous recommendation. And those quickly and easily lose their validity if someone had it done already, right? And if we didn't ask them the right questions when they walked in.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I haven't seen. I guess the Rex go out like that.
Sure.
Obviously, something that needs to be. Yeah, nobody wants that. and it to kind of circle back real quick on marketing, it's kind of like uh pushing ads and doing, certain ad content that you might see on social media or on Google ads is like, I don't know how many times I've ever clicked on any of those ads that's really popped up, whether it be on Facebook or on Google. And it's like nobody likes that stuff, but yet it's pushed, in marketing, like do the ads, do the ads, do the ads. And you're like, okay, I'm spending more money, and it's like I'm not getting enough cars. What do I do? Well, up your ads budget. Okay, you got it. And I'm doing, and then, but to look at it as like a consumer, I'm never clicking on those ads. It's an interesting thing to think about, and it's the same thing if you keep pushing these recommendations. Like, I don't want all these. I Like you said, I want a phone call. I want to talk to you. What do you think my vehicle needs? Right? Like, I got no problem spending some money. Like, I want to take care of my car, but I don't want to keep getting pushed all these recommendations and quotes, right? Like, I don't like that. I'd rather have a call and like, hey, so this is what I think about your car. This is what I would do if it was mine. Oh, that all sounds fantastic. Let's do that. But yet we're all pushed with this notion of like, oh, send them the digital vehicle inspection and let them do it on their own. And I
It's
know I'm
not
like kind
advising.
of back talking myself a little bit, but it's like, how exactly do you want it as if you were the consumer? But then they're like, well, don't you can't you can't spend your own money on someone else's car. You can't estimate vehicles based on what's in your pocket. So um it's tough. It's tough to know what is expected.
Well, again, I mean, what you're saying is exactly what I said. Is it becomes less advising, right? I'm not advising you, right? I mean, today I had and please, I hope you operate the same way. Maybe you don't, but are you the type of shop that you're getting brakes? We're going to recommend a brake flush if it's due. I hope that's probably real, right? I mean, I love the add-on fluid changes, right? Oh, you're getting a differential seal replaced. We're going to change the differential fluid, and those are separate line items. But where that becomes problematic is, I send off an estimate today, and probably 10 things on the estimate, and the guy chose to replace the differential seal, but didn't choose the front differential service. And we could argue whether or not that's real, or for me it's real. For me it's a BG service, and now you're part of the protection plan and whatnot. But I'm giving him a choice at that point, right? Like, what to choose from. And so what that's trained me to do, specifically relating to shopware, is to build jobs that contain more items, right? Like, if I know that every time we replace the struts on this Acadia, the sway bar links are noisy, right? I'm not going to send you two separate estimates, one for the struts and one for the sway bar links. I'm just going to make one estimate, right? Here it is. I mean,
Right.
that's what it has to be. And
Yeah, like doing a water pump on a timing belt. Like, we're doing
right,
both. You don't get to choose just the water pump, and we're hanging your own timing belt back on.
right, but that's what we promote, right? I mean,
To a
we're
point, to
promoting
an
them
extent, yeah, I could see
depending
that.
on how you build the jobs.
Right. I mean, the level of the competency of the advisor has a big role of it too, and the communication between the technician and the advisor. That, I mean, with shopware in particular, I've noticed really needs to be stepped up. I mean, that needs to be the next level because, just like you said, I mean, most of us can look up a timing belt kit and the water pumps on there, but how do we know that the sway bar end links go bad because when we do the struts, or selling the differential service with the pinion seal? Um, Unless you're mechanically inclined, it's really difficult to know those until you have that problem, and then you create the system on the back end, which is what I think most of us do.
Yeah.
Like, you wait
Well,
for a problem and then write it up, but it doesn't always work that way.
and to the point of what I just said, right? I mean, think about this. If I'm saying, replace a front differential pinion seal, I could easily just loop into that, well, and change the differential gear oil. Now, why did we not do that? Because we have reminders set up based on those can jobs, based on that differential service, that once you do this, we're going to remind you in 30K to do it again, right? But the fact is, I had to have a kind of, call it an awkward conversation with a customer thereafter, like, hey, I saw what you approved, but, we cannot do this differential service. I'm sorry, we have to do this differential service, with the replacement of the seal. So you get my point. I mean, it's just, like I said, it becomes less advising. And, it's almost like part of me thinks it may be better just to send the digital inspection with no estimates and then verbalize the estimates, right? And maybe I've got that wrong, but I know that, you know, we are at an interesting time because the electronic communications, limit our skills, right? Limit our ability to advise people. And, that presents to me a challenge if we rely 100% on digital communications, right? And so,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. You're not ordering a cheeseburger with no ketchup and no pickles or whatever, right? Like this stuff requires a detailed explanation. It really does. And even though it makes perfect sense to us when we get church up this little DVI and we send it over, um, who knows how that's interpreted on the other end? And I think it's important to think about it like that for sure.
yeah, cool, man.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
this has been great. This is well, we got some good timing in this one.
I listen. I told you, man. I can talk until I'm blue in the face.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and spending time with me.